All right, I'm going to go ahead and call this joint meeting of the Anchorage Assembly and Anchorage School Board to order. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll for the Assembly?
Mr. Rivera?
Present.
Ms. LaFrance? Here. Mr. Constant? Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Mr. Dyson?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Mr. Perez-Verdia? Ms. Quinn Davidson? Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
Ms. Zolotel? Here. Ms. Kennedy? Here you go.
Thank you. For the record, both Mr. Constant and Ms. Kennedy did tell me that they'd be running a little late. And who was doing? Thank you.
Ms. Marchette?
Here.
Ms. Mitchell?
Here.
Mr. Donnelly?
Here.
Ms. Hildy?
Here.
Ms. Michaelis?
Here.
And Ms. Bellamy?
Here. Andy.
And Mr. Hall.
And Ms. Rowell.
All right. Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance. If Representative Foghorn, if you could please lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Let's go ahead and do a land acknowledgement, but I don't actually have the language for the land acknowledgement in front of me. Do we have that, clerk staff? I'll go ahead and come back to that once we find that language. Apologies. Let's go ahead and do minutes of previous meetings. Are there any edits to the minutes? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Move to approve minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any opposition to approval of the minutes as written? Seeing none, then the minutes are approved. Go ahead and move on to approval of the agenda. So you'll notice that the agenda is quite different than normal, and this is largely due to the guidance that the charter provides us. And Ms. LaFrance brought her charter with us today, and in that it provides some specific language which you can find at the bottom of your agenda on the various topics that the two bodies should be discussing and collaborating on. So this agenda change is an attempt to conform with the guidance provided in the charter. With that, is there any questions or discussion on the new agenda form? We'll test it out today, see how it goes. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? And is there a second? Thank you. Any opposition to approval of the agenda? Seeing none, then the agenda is approved. All right, then moving on to financial planning, bond debt. Who was presenting on that item?
Madam Chairman. Yes. Yes, thank you. This was a request that we just wanted to, for awareness and discussion purposes, I would like Jim Anderson, our Chief Financial Officer, to just make overall comments. I do want to share, we did receive positive feedback at our last meeting that better than a PowerPoint is just written information. We could, if you prefer to only go electronic, we will do that next time. Just let us know and we won't print a copy for you. But the information we're sharing is included in this white paper, if you will, so that you can refer back to it. And Jim Anderson just wants to state those points that we're all on the same page and aware.
Okay, just as a quick review, I think everyone's tracking. Bond debt's been discussed since last January. That on August 19th, the governor did sign a veto on the authorizations bill to cut state bond debt reimbursement by 50%. So for Anchorage, for ASD's bonds, that was approximately $20.5 million. We went back as we closed out last fiscal year. We had about $4 million in last year's debt service fund that we could apply towards that. And so that cuts the deficit down to about $16.5 million. We've talked to the mayor's staff. I think everyone's tracking $16.5 million is roughly an increase in taxes next year of about $48 per $100,000 in assessed property value.
Any questions on that? Seeing none, thank you. Oh, yes, Mr. Dyson.
I'm sorry. Are we finished with the whole report?
It was just informative in that section of bond debt. If you had any questions, we're certainly willing
Yeah.
to.
Can you tell me how you're doing on reimbursement from the feds on earthquake repair?
That's another.
We are actually going to cover earthquake in just a few minutes, sir.
All right, thank you. You're ahead of me as usual.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson. All right, we can move on.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Was there any other discussion regarding bond debt? Okay, seeing none, then let's go ahead and move on to capital improvement needs. A high-level report on funded CIP list. Did you want to start, Ms. LaFrance, or do we want to let the school board start?
Actually, if you would like to start.
Sure.
Great.
In regard to the next two requests from Vice Chair LaFrance, we have high-level report on funded CIP, and we'll move right into earthquake, and then those could be discussed jointly. Again, we have some written documentation, but Tom Roth and George Michaelis, who are leading the charge in regard to both of those, are here. Oh, or maybe Jim. Go
I
ahead.
think it's a combination on the second topic. On the high-funded CIP needs, the first thing we wanted to point out, not everyone's tracking that across our city, that the state, long ago when the foundation formula was first developed, knew that it was not supposed to include all of the capital requirements for education. So they broke out the districts into those districts that fell under boroughs that could impose taxes and those that couldn't. So for the boroughs that couldn't, didn't have a tax base, they came up with a state capital grant fund, and it's pretty large. And that's kind of what I put in this white paper. And then, of course, those that were funded by boroughs that could collect taxes, the state chose to reimburse at either 70% or 30 or 60%, still by paying the preponderance of the school capital construction up until the 5-year moratorium, which started on January 1st, 2015. And this was really just an info to show that when you look at all the state grant money, we have about 30+% of all the students in the state are in ASD. And over the last 11 years, we received about 3% of all of the funds that the state provides in terms of capital grants. The rest of all of our capital needs have been through bonds.
Thank you. Any questions on that report? Yes, Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the ASD for the update. I get a lot of constituent questions about capital projects, and I've got some questions. Actually, I'll go ahead and forward after this meeting to the administration concerning just timing and how much flexibility the district has, and then some other specific questions. But I wanted to call attention to the spreadsheets that Mr. Roth and Mr. Ratcliffe directed me to online. And just to point out for those who may not know, the district maintains a list of planned projects and also projects under construction as well. Would you speak to that, Mr. Roth?
So if I might real quick to reference what the member LaFrance is talking to. So capital planning and construction, which is our facilities department, they maintain an updated status on projects that are either in construction or projects that are in the design phase, and you can access that. It's readily accessible from their webpage. To briefly talk to the timing of it, so the funded projects, there are a couple of considerations when we talk about timing of projects. So as everyone in this body knows, we will go through a process where we get board approval on a bond proposition that will go to the assembly for approval no later than the second meeting in January, and it gets on the ballot. So once it's approved, that really kind of starts the clock. And generally speaking, if you look at a single project, a project will probably run anywhere from a year's time from point of approval to anywhere from 3 to 4 years. Because projects, you'll generally go through a design phase. That takes about a year to a year and a half. And then you'll go through a competitive bid for a construction contractor, and then you'll get to building. So generally speaking, a project is complete 3 to 4 years after the ballot is approved by the public.
I would like to add as well, Madam Vice Chair, that the projects for capital improvements or major maintenance are not only funded by bonds, that our board has appropriated operations money when appropriate every year. This year, for instance, funds were given for security, for improvements at Chugiak High, track for safety. Notice right downtown Central, middle school's being painted, some upgrades. So we have a carpet replacement that isn't school-wide. We have an assessment of classrooms that we, little by little, go through and do quite a bit of major maintenance on our own, knowing to reinvest into ourselves. So it is pretty complex with the different areas, but we do have a fund and support from the board to demonstrate major maintenance and just general upkeep when we need to do it. And it isn't on a bond, but it's needed. The board has appropriated. I think it was $1.5 million this year. It's been a couple of million in the past, and that's smaller projects district-wide to improve the educational environment of our students. And so, to just the point, I picked up a little bit about the community continues to ask about bonds and spending. I wanted to balance that with money that was designed for operations does also go to the learning environment.
Thank you. And just to follow up on what's online, I thought it was really helpful too that it identifies the funding source, which year the bond was passed, or other source of money, as well as if it's expected, the project's expected to be on time and on budget. Thank you for that information. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Prince. Seeing no other questions on this topic, we'll go ahead and move on to ASD earthquake needs update.
Great, so I'll take that one too. So last time we met, we provided a quick update, and you should be able to see those notes in your handout. But in short, there were a couple of schools after the earthquake. We had 15 schools that we had identified for more involved assessment by architectural engineering firms. 2 of the schools that were deemed unsafe, Eagle River Elementary and Greenie Middle School, they were offline at the time of last meeting. We had informed this group that we had gone to bid and had awarded contracts for design for both of those schools. So in that time frame, for Eagle River Elementary School.
What was the word you used?
For
design? Or
design.
For new, tear them down and build new ones?
No, sir.
Design for their
Design, the plan moving forward, the guidance that we received from the school board, based on the feedback we had received from the engineer teams that went in to look at those schools, is that they were economically viable for repair. Okay. So that is the action that we're taking. Also, these schools, because they didn't perform the earthquake, we're increasing the seismic performance of those schools, so they're at a higher seismic resilience when they'll be complete.
Thank you. Pardon the interruption.
No, sir, any time. So Eagle River Elementary School, we have received, since that last meeting, we have received a 35% design. We're anticipating receipt of the 35% design for Greenie at any time. It could be as early as not the end of this week, sometime next week. To get to some of the other things that the district has been working, and this is primarily in the FEMA, in the State Department of the DHS, Emergency Management. So we had a requirement to go through a number of schools with FEMA to validate what we had identified as damage. So we have completed that process with FEMA. So concurrent with this, there were a couple of categories that we could file with FEMA in their portal and seek reimbursement. So we have completed the submission for, it's called Category A, and that's debris removal following the earthquake. And the district received about $500,000 from FEMA on that. We're currently working on 2 other categories. Category B, which is the work that was done immediately in response to the earthquake, emergency repairs. We are inputting data with FEMA now on that. We had some rulings that we had to wait back from FEMA on how we would input data and what categories we could put it in. We got that clarification, so we're moving forward. We should have category B, which is, again, that emergent work done pretty soon, within the next first week of October, so we're several weeks out. We think that amount, if FEMA accepts and approves what we propose, would be probably about $5 to $6 million. And the good thing about this money is it's no strings attached. It does not obligate a obtain and maintain. The next big move will be what they call Category E, and I'm sure your municipality teams are working this too. And that's the equipment and building repairs, permanent repairs. So FEMA will cover up to 75% of just repairs to the earthquake damage. With this reimbursement, though, comes a requirement to obtain and maintain property insurance, earthquake insurance, which would be in perpetuity for retention of the building. So we're going to be much more deliberate and careful and collaborate with the superintendent and the board before we move forward on seeking these federal monies, understanding what that's going to mean in the long run. So that's kind of where we are with FEMA. Anything on that? So in addition to the reimbursement, we are working some grant submissions too. This week we submitted intentions to file for grant reimbursement. FEMA has 2 projects, 404, 406. 404 is kind of a preemptive effort to improve your posture. That's the primary category we're going to put grant submissions in for. If we get everything back, that number's around $59 million. So that would be a pretty good chunk of money to go towards improving seismic performance. So I'll pause if anybody has any questions or comments.
Thank you. Just to note for the record, we've been joined by Ms. Kennedy, Ms. Quinn Davidson, and then about 15-20 minutes ago, Mr. Perez Verdia. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you. I'm sorry, could you repeat, when you talk about the earthquake insurance, was that only required for the new buildings that we're repairing, or is that a new requirement we're going to have for all of the facilities or a certain percentage of the facilities?
So want to respond to that?
It's basically based on the total amount of money received from FEMA, from a grant. So if we receive $50 million, the expectation is that we will have at least $50 million in equivalent earthquake insurance in perpetuity. As you all know, earthquake insurance up here is extremely expensive. It's very hard to get on a lot of different entities. So that's something that the district is going to have to really do a cost-benefit analysis to see what's the best course of action for the taxpayers and the district.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Dyson.
Yeah, thank you. So, for quite a number of years, we have several schools in the Chugaki River area that are under capacity. And I understood that a part of the decision on the rebuilding of Eagle River Elementary and greening would be taking into account that we have overcapacity. And so, and I trust that discussion happened. So for me offline, you can have a discussion with me of the decision process you had to restore those schools to their original capacity or deal with the overcapacity issue. Respectfully.
Yes, sir. Happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson. Ms. Salatel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With regard to earthquake insurance, are there any building resiliency upgrades or other design factors we should consider that could lower our earthquake insurance in the future? Is there something we could be doing now that could save us money later? And the follow-up question to that is, if not, and we're anticipating really large premiums, where's that decision point actually at where you have to decide if you're going to accept the FEMA funds and seek the equivalent earthquake insurance or not?
Okay, so you asked several questions here, so let me start attacking.
And actually, before you begin, if you could identify yourself.
Yeah, George Michaelis, consultant to the Anchorage School District. So there is in the Code of Federal Regulations, as well as FEMA manuals, a provision for providing for an alternate means of mitigation as opposed to having to acquire earthquake insurance. So there's a lengthy process that you have to go through to prove that this alternate means of mitigation is in fact a cost-effective method to use to help prevent future occurrences of the nature that we, as you know, experience. So there is a clause in there. We are pursuing that. But again, it's up to the state and primarily FEMA as to whether or not they'll accept that in lieu of insurance. The good thing about it is that if in fact the district does do that, then they've accomplished several goals. Number one is that they fixed a facility and brought it up to a higher level of mitigation levels to preclude future occurrences. But number two, in perpetuity, the high rates associated with insurance, and you're really not getting anything out of it unless a disaster occurred. But because of the amount of money that basically would be off the table because of requirements for, you may have to have $500,000 or $1 million per property, that basically the damage has to exceed that before you start receiving insurance. And so when you look at all of that, sometimes it's just not cost effective to have insurance. So this alternate means would really be a boon for the district and the taxpayers if in fact FEMA and the state will approve it.
May I would like to add, and I think I might be reading too much into the question, but I would appreciate either George or Tom to speak on what we're doing with our buildings in general to increase the mitigation for earthquake. It had come up and we had received quite a bit of negative feedback prior to the earthquake in regard to Eagle River's roof on a bond being $6 million. And I hope we can, that when we put money into buildings through bonds to upgrade them, we are upgrade that, like before the earthquake, Eagle River was supposed to get raise their level of earthquake mitigation. That's why the roof was so expensive, because it was going to attach the walls to the roof or whatever. So if you could speak to that, what number we were at, what number we're going to, and the differences. We had quite a few questions in regard to, well, how come hospitals were fine and schools weren't? We also can just share the differences in those. But
Sure.
Every time that we invest additional money, if we can do earthquake mitigation, those are in the bonds. So if you can.
And to Dr. Bishop's point, the roof examples are perfect. We have her comment about the cost, because what we're doing is, when we're talking about a roof replacement, it's been a very intentional and deliberate effort. I've got Tom Fennison, who's my CP and CC director, to increase the seismic performance, and we're always kind of moving that direction. In most schools now, there's a common scale that's used. It's a scale 1 to 10. Most of the district buildings rate at like a level 4 seismic resilience, and that means the building will survive an earthquake. It won't collapse. People inside will be fine, but there'll be damages that will need to be repaired. We're working in Eagle River Elementary and Rooney are two examples to increase the seismic performance of those buildings, because they failed, up to a level 6.5, which is called damage control in that system, where the seismic damage to a building in an earthquake, again, it's all presumptive on magnitude, duration, etc. But the assumption being, based on these improvements, that these buildings will be better, that students can most likely continue classes in those schools. So that's kind of the longer term goal. And we did talk a couple of figures at the last meeting. Right now, the fixes are around $50 million just to fix earthquake damage. But we had addressed a figure about 3 times that amount to raise seismic performance, to increase that level in the schools across the district, at least those that were damaged. So that's one piece. So some of these mitigation measures, and we mentioned the grants. There's $59 million. So I'll just give you an example. So we are looking to anchor all the shelves and bookcases in schools, because we had examples where bookcases were not not surprisingly, moving and some tumbled over. So that's one effort. Ceiling grids and tiles, probably the biggest thing that you would have seen in pictures, where a lot of rooms had ceiling tiles and light fixtures that collapsed from the ceiling. So one of the mitigation measures to increase your seismic resilience is to anchor those properly to the ceiling structure itself, so you don't have that kind of thing. So those are some of the examples of the efforts to increase seismic performance. So again, I hope I got to that point, Dr. Bishop. I'm happy to entertain any other questions, comments. Tie downs, our mechanical fixtures that came just dislodged, bracing those again. These are just other examples of how do you increase seismic performance.
The other thing you might want to mention is that even bringing it up to the 6.5, that's still not the level of hospitals. Hospitals have a higher level than that, but substantially, when you bring it up to 6.5, that is a substantial improvement, because if you look at all the district schools, even at the design that they had at the 4.0 level, that even though they were damaged, there was not any collapses, and I have to emphasize that. They basically did exactly what they were designed to do, to prevent a collapse and injuries. And so they did what they were designed to do. Unfortunately, there was all kinds of other damage that was done that was costly. So by bringing it up to a 6.5, which is still not the highest level that's given to hospitals and to fire stations, it still gives you an awful lot of protection. And that's what we're shooting for.
Just to close, making some of these changes is going to be a change in practice at the practitioner level. If you've ever been into a classroom, your own classroom, think about it. Educators like to rearrange the rooms every now and then, and we couldn't afford to continue to change, and re-anchor. So we're going to have to explore that with our employees about understanding why we would do something like that. But certainly, bookshelves are moved around a lot in schools, and so we just want to, it will take us time to change the practice and the behaviors.
Thank you. Ms. Alatal, do you have a follow-up?
Thank you. I missed it if it was answered. When is the decision point on earthquake insurance versus?
So it's actually kind of a complex question. I'm not sure that I'm prepared to give you an informed answer. I think when we're talking, we still have to go through a lot of coordination with FEMA. We don't really have like insurance costs, what we think those premiums would be. The insurance industry is a little bit skittish about entering into those discussions until you have some firm number to come back to. We really only have like one example at this point in the school, Eagle River, where we have a number based on that design. But I think when you're talking tens of millions of dollars that we would potentially be burdening property owners on, that we would have a discussion with the superintendent and then the school board and present, these are the options, these are the implications of taking on this additional reimbursement funding, and this is what we're going to have as a result of that. And then we make informed, intentional decisions. But what that decision point is, I can't tell you.
Thank you, Ms. Alatal. Thank you. I don't see any other questions on this topic. Mr. Grants, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move to change the order of the day per request from someone who would like to be here for item 6, that discussion, and move to take up 6A and 6B after item 7B.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that motion or any opposition? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and change the order of the day. So we now have item 7A, 2020 census count. I put this on the agenda partly to update both the Assembly and the School Board on the work of the 2020 Census and the Complete Counts Commission, and to have a discussion with the School Board and the administration on work that the school district is doing regarding the 2020 census. I think we are joined by Ms. Sonia Hunt, so if you want to join us up here for this discussion as the co-chair of the Complete Counts Commission, I would love to get your perspective on things.
We'll move that chair to the table.
Great. So the Complete Count Commission is something that the administration put forward and the Assembly approved to create a joint commission of a variety of different partners, from housing to education to city and on, to see how we can count some of our hardest to count populations and hardest to count geography, so our locations in our neighborhoods. And this commission has been meeting and is focusing on ways that we can get the word out about the 2020 census. And primarily at our last meeting, we discussed ways that the municipality can help get the word out. So everything from putting leaflets in our bills that we send out, hey, get ready for the census, it's going to be online, it's going to be a little bit different, to having flyers at our different poster boards at municipal offices, just letting folks know about the census. And so I just wanted to bring this as a topic here to let folks know, see if you have any questions about the Complete Counts Commission. And particularly I think one of the hard to count groups is our youth, and I forget the age range. It's probably not ASD age range. I think it's the 0 to 5. But still, I think there are a lot of families that the school district is connected to that probably touches that hard to count group. So I wanted to open that as a discussion. I don't know if Ms. Hunt, if you want to add anything to that.
Well, certainly good morning. My name is Sonia. I'm trying to read this and my name is Sonia and my last name is Hunt, H-U-N-T-E. And I serve on the commission representing the Anchorage School District along with my colleague, Katie Bison, with English Language Learners Program, with the English Language Learners Program. And so certainly we are happy to be able to assist in this effort. We understand that the 2020 census is important as it's dollars for our state and certainly to trickle down to our students. And we want to be helpful in any way that we can in promoting the work of the 2020 census.
Thank you. So at this point, I just wanted to have sort of an open dialogue. If there's any ideas maybe that the administration has or work that the administration of the school district is doing around the 2020 census, I'm not aware of that, or if the school board members have any ideas or thoughts regarding the 2020 census. Just want to have that open dialogue.
Well, if I can also add that we are aware that the census support only covers 12 languages. Within our school district alone, there are over 85 languages that are spoken by our children and families. And we certainly want to collaborate on that effort to make sure that everybody understands at least the importance of the census and what it means for our children.
Also, can you share that we're going to go to our board for guidance with Council of Great City Schools that are engaged?
So we are preparing to go to our illustrious school board to discuss a resolution, a board resolution in support of the 2020 census. And
it's part of the Council of Great City Schools.
And we have a draft from the Council of Great City Schools.
Great. Do we know when that's going to be presented to the school board?
It goes through our governance committee first, so I'm not sure that next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Ms. Mitchell.
So I would just, this is a topic I don't think we've really addressed yet, but I would think that we can also communicate to our families district-wide why it's important.
That's what Sonia said, yeah. Okay.
Absolutely, and our superintendent, Dr. Bishop, is certainly 100% behind this.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Mr. Holler.
I note that this is also one of those teachable moments. A lot of people don't have the connect between census is a significant part of our Constitution and a vital function of our national government. A reminder to the elementary and maybe secondary social studies teachers that this is a particularly good time to just bring this up and make that connection. With the idea that kids go home and talk to their parents about it, likely elevates the understanding of it. Sadly, a lot of people don't know why we do it, other than the fact that somebody's doing it. But it's rooted in our democracy.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler. Mr. Dyson.
I assume ignorantly that we have a very small percentage of our population is concerned about being here illegally, and but somebody else perhaps answer this. But is there a in-place structure whereby the names of the people who are in the census get transmitted to the feds, and then secondly, we ought to accurately reassure all our parent families and so on and so forth that what they're doing is not going to in any way jeopardize their status.
Absolutely. That has been a point of discussion in the commission meetings. We do have a commission member, her name is escaping me right now, that is particularly specializes in immigration law. That is a part of this commission community. So those are certainly questions that have been raised and addressed. As you know, there's been a question removed about citizenship from the census to just ensure increased protections and participation.
Yeah, so if I may, do you know that, is there a way that our census information gets transferred to the federal government? The details of the people's names and addresses?
So while the names and addresses are escalated up to our federal government, certainly the citizenship status is not. That question was removed from the census. Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, and so the Alaska Institute for Justice and the executive director there is Robin Broden. She is the one that is on our commission and is really working this issue because she works extensively with our immigrant populations and refugee populations and wants to ensure that they feel confident to take the census. And from everything that we're hearing, in regards to confidentiality, there are a lot of safe, strong guards for confidentiality, and folks should feel confident that information will not be shared with the various federal agencies. It's going to be housed within the census, and it's not going to go beyond that. And to do so is a severe federal crime. Ms. Salatel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to say, if you haven't already encountered her in Community Council, Sharon Hex is out recruiting for census employees, but it's a great time to be talking about the importance of the census. She brings it up some, but to the extent that we can be providing this information, I think it's really fantastic. I've been surprised pleasantly at the engagement by residents of Community Council with question and curiosity about the census, partly because it's going to be in a new format, partly because there was a bit of controversy around it, but we have their attention, so I think it's a great time to keep the conversation going. Really, if you also happen to have a PTA representative attending community councils, so just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Salatel. President Marcet.
I too share concern with our immigrants, and only because I've been to several community events where they've talked about how to respond if ISIS comes to the door, things like that. And I know even in our school district, they are telling their children, if you're bullied, do not report it. Do not pay any attention to yourself. We do not want us to stand out for any reason. And so I think this is going to be more of an issue than you think it is, because personally, I probably wouldn't answer it if I was.
Yes, thank you, Madam President.
So if I can add, in terms of strategy, we have been talking about just using points of trust within certain communities, people that are points of trust, that already have a pre-established relationship with certain communities, as a liaison to just liaise the relationship in this process of getting an accurate count. We all know that it's democracy, data, and dollars, as one of the fellow commission members eloquently states, are at stake. And so we want to make sure that we are keeping those dynamics in mind in getting to the end goal and increasing funding for our state and our children.
And I agree, I think you guys are doing a great job. I just think that it's gonna be a tougher issue than, it's gonna be very hard.
I absolutely agree. I probably would not open my door just for a point of safety.
Yeah.
So we definitely want to use touch points to liaise that to increase the possibility of our count.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to echo and acknowledge those comments, President Marcet, that there is still fear in the community, and there likely will still be fear. So the commission is hard at work trying to figure out ways that we can allay those concerns and connect folks with trusted leaders. Yes, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was thinking that possibly we could put some signage up at public libraries, because there are many people that may be using their computers at those facilities. That might be a good time for them to go ahead and fill out the census letter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Peterson, for bringing that up. There was actually an idea, particularly to help with recruitment of census workers, that when you log into the library computers, the first thing that you see there is a landing page. Hey, do you want to work for the census? And that's something that Mary Jo is looking at. She's part of the commission.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Yes, Ms. Miller.
Is it possible to work with the churches to set up little census stations in churches?
Do you want to speak to that?
So we actually have been exploring, I know that it's probably hard, we call it the rainbow paper. We have been exploring just various points of contact in different communities, to include the church or faith communities around this, because we know that they are trusted institutions by some, and we definitely want to leverage any connection that we may have to people that work with the community every day.
Thank you, Ms. Bellamy. Any other questions on this topic? Okay, thank you, Ms. Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Let's go ahead and move on in our agenda to item 7B, status of expanded pre-K with ASD. And I know of note we have Representative Ivy Sponholz here who wants to speak to this. So I don't know if you have a presentation and then we can hear from the representative.
We just provided, Chair Rivera, we provided some data in regard to our many different preschools that we have, the different types. It's the last Excel spreadsheet. We have over the last 2 years increased it quite a bit. One of the measures this year, through grant writing, our director preschool is here, and she's connected with the local preschool working groups. We've been in many discussions in regard to universal preschool. Again, the idea of universal preschool isn't that they all are done in the schools. It's really a collaborative of community efforts. And Chelsea Morrow is here. She's done major lifts. She can answer any specific questions. But she and her team captured a great majority of the team's funds, or the state's funds, in regard to funding preschools and that aspect of it. One of the tough areas in our district is in order to really expand preschool. Part of that expense is in transportation. And knowing our limited number of employees as bus drivers and buses, we did go to a Tier 4, which starts preschools 45 minutes after elementary. So now we have high school, middle school, elementary, preschool. That is a major point of contention because it changed employees' work days. And we are working internally through those challenges and concerns of staff, and we hope to resolve them. But that was a decision that was made in order to broaden access of preschool. So with that, We don't have any additional information in our white page. We put some, but Chelsea, if you'd like to add a few statements, but I wanted you to put a face with a name, and she is the leader of our preschool work. I'm indebted to her because she's done such great work. So
thank you. I think the only thing I would add is that we have a multitude of programs within preschool and ASD. On the chart, you will see a lot of different types of programs on the left-hand side, and then the amount of classrooms, the amount of students, etc. Within our special education community, we just restructured so that our 4-year-olds are all attending preschool for 4 hours a day, regardless of special education program or general education program. So now we have a continuum of services. Children come to us at age 3 as they transition in for a 2.5-hour program day, generally speaking up to a 4-hour program day into that 6.5-hour day for kindergarten. So if there's any questions that I might be able to answer about the different types of programs or how they're all a little bit different, I'd be happy to.
Yes, Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question on the number of students on the section for special ed, the developmental program for 3 and 4-year-olds for Ravenwood. It says there are 3.5 classes, 3.5 teachers, but there's only 6 students. Is that correct, or is that?
There's 2 different programs there. Intensive needs numbers are included in all of the total numbers there. We have a communication program for children at Ravenwood as well as developmental. So there are 4 full day partial day classrooms for preschool, but one of those sessions is for communication, which is children that only experience language delays. They don't have any developmental delays into their services. So it's like 3.5 session times of developmental and then a half-day session of communication program.
Okay, so altogether there's probably 21 students there?
Yes, there should be more with the developmental and the communication altogether. And that grows throughout the year, so children are placed as they come through early intervention, and we are seeing great numbers there. Again, our numbers are definitely increasing again this school year, so as they come through and are assessed, then they're placed into program. And that happens typically around their 3rd birthday, but for families that have not sought out or had concerns or really known how to navigate the system yet, then they will come to us during their 4-year-old year as well.
It will fill up their need.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Ms. Hill?
So is it a typo? It just says there's 6 kids in the program.
It may be.
So I want to tell you
that was my
Yeah.
question. Okay, because that just seemed like,
Sorry, I think it's just.
Oh, yeah, that is. So sorry. It's definitely more than 6 children.
thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Allentown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Similarly, I have that same question on the Alaska State School for Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Is there only 1 preschool student?
There is for that program. So that is children, and it is a mixed grade class. So AKSD is a program that goes pre-K 12, and we only have 1 preschooler right now that is accessing those services. As we get more, generally the structure has been a preschool classroom of its own when we've had more students, but since there is just 1 child, it is a preschool K 1st grade combo for that class.
Thank you.
So these are just preschool kids, but the classroom might have more kids that are older.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Allentown. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the spreadsheet. I didn't realize that the pre-K program had expanded to this degree. So just general questions about demand. I mean, what's the demand as you see it? I know Dr. Bishop mentioned transportation is a hurdle.
Yeah.
What are other hurdles, or what do you see as the next step?
I would say a definite hurdle for us is our grant funding through the state. So our grants are generally just for the year, and there's sometimes a very quick turnaround on that grant process in order to be able to sustain our programs for the following year. And then the programs that we do have, we do ask for as much as we think we can possibly get for those programs. But we are in our general education, which is where that funding goes towards, we have an overwhelming response to families applying for those programs, and we have just 17 kids in each classroom, and so we have wait lists at every single program, and those applications continue to come in. We do leave it open because we fill spots as they drop, but we are over double our wait list numbers right now, and it's just September. Those applications will continue to come in until we open for the next school year. So I talk with a lot of families where they, either in a Title I neighborhood, there's only one classroom of 17 children. We know we're not hitting anywhere near the amount of kids that are at the highest need for preschool. Those families are not accessing typically private settings. Some are in Head Start, but they only have so many spots as well for their funding. And then right above that, the 6 classrooms that we added this year are in the lower middle class area, so that we really targeted families that didn't qualify for Head Start, but then couldn't afford to access a private setting. So a lot of those children were at home. And we see a big need there as well, because we have families, we do preference families that live in our neighborhood school zones for those programs. So we see a lot of families trying to jump in because they want something for their children.
Thank you. May I follow up?
Sure.
Mr. Chair, with a question actually to Mr. Falsey. If maybe you could address if there's been any interest on the community side.
Yeah, thank you, Assemblymember France. I think there's a huge interest on the municipality side, and this seems like a problem that requires both parties to play together. In some ways, the school district would have a lot of control over the shape of an expanded pre-K function, but the Assembly would be finding the money for it. We became interested in it as a public policy matter because there is a whole social science literature that says we're leaving money on the table. Every dollar you invest in pre-K has something estimated between $6 and $9 of social returns. Social returns are difficult to monetize in a lot of cases because a lot of the social science literature says you're reducing your prison enrollments 20 years in the future. You can't borrow against reduced prison enrollments in the future and bring it back to today. But the conversation that we got particularly interested, looking at some of the numbers, that it could be tens of millions of dollars to expand it very broadly, was whether there was a social impact bond, pay for success type play here. And we did some extensive studies where we looked at Salt Lake City and Chicago, who did it. They found a financial model where they borrowed all of the money to start an expanded pre-K funding and paid for it out of savings. Well, what were the savings? For Chicago and Salt Lake City, they did longitudinal studies that found that there was a subpopulation of children who ended up in special ed, not because they had any genetic disposition to end up in special ed, but just because they came to school so unready, and that they were only in special ed for remedial purposes, and they were in for a couple of years, and then they bounced back out. And the school district could give you better numbers, but this cost of special ed per student is something like $10,000 a pupil. The cost of mainstream ed is $1,000. So you say, what would I rather spend my money on? Could I do student readiness and invest it on the front end and then save it on the back end? That seemed like a winning combination for those cities. So Salt Lake City and Chicago went to the market and borrowed those funds, and they have been stepping through that. We are interested in whether that could happen in Anchorage. It all sensitively depends on whether our pre-K intervention actually does reduce special ed enrollment. There are two challenges with that. One is a data challenge and one is a money challenge. The data challenge is all of the data is protected by federal PERPA and all of the federal funds. So it's kind of a difficult data question. But I think there is natural experiment data there, as Chelsea had made available to us. The Title I schools are all oversubscribed. So for the 17 kids who are going into the Title 21 schools, there are Title I schools, there are a similar number of kids who didn't make it, who were on the wait list. So we could look at them and say, what happened to those kids? Did that change? That's not something that we could do. That's something that the school district has to do. The second is, because of the way schools are funded in Alaska, if we actually succeeded in picking up the population, putting them into pre-K, and then reducing our SPED enrollments, we would get less money from the state in the formula fund. That seems to me like a design challenge, though, that you could negotiate with DEED or even take to the state legislature to say, I mean, come on, guys, what do we actually want to spend our money on? But in order to get that engine going, we just have to know if that's a story that we can tell here at the local level. So we're We remain very interested in it because it really seems like the social science data is very compelling. Why are we leaving money on the table? But it is a big challenge. It's going to be hard to find lots of money to jumpstart the engine in the absence of something like the social impact. So we're happy to participate and love to do more about that. In the meantime, aside from the big play, I know that the school district has been thinking about renting some spaces that not to third-party providers, and I don't know the status of that, but we're all trying to push that ball forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I think before I get into the queue here, this might be a good time for Representative Svanholz to speak.
Hi, thank you very much. Great to see so many people. I appreciate the invitation to speak, and I think that Manager Falsey addressed some of the topics that I think are important, but I wanted to sort of underscore the importance of pre-K when we're thinking about how to have the healthiest, most productive city that we possibly can. There's a lot of reasons that pre-K is helpful. It does help with educational outcomes. It also helps with health outcomes. It also helps with economic development outcomes. And the military nationally has identified pre-K as an important workforce development strategy over the long term. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce has also identified pre-K as an important economic development strategy. And I think in October on the 9th and 10th, THREAD is actually having a conference on the economic impact of early childhood development. And what we know right now is that we have, a very small number of the people that are eligible for high quality evidence-based pre-K that are getting that on the low income spectrum. And those that are on the highest income spectrum can afford that already themselves and are buying that access. But there's this huge swath of people that are in the middle that are not getting access to pre-K. And I think that's really important as we look at sort of what the impacts are. James Heckman is a Nobel laureate economist who's done a lot of research, and he's the person who produced the numbers that Mr. Falsey was referencing. It's called the Heckman equation. And in pre-K, there's a 1 to 7 return on investment for pre-K, and as you go younger and younger and younger in early childhood education investments, that return on investment gets even higher. So if you invest in the first year of one's life or home visiting, the return on investment is actually 1 to 12. So that's interesting information for you thinking about how it is that we think about how we care about our families, how we care about our children. The research is very clear that high quality evidence-based pre-K. Now, this is not putting people in front of the television. This is not giving them hot dogs. This is these are highly trained professionals offering very rigorous early childhood education, the kind that Chelsea and the team at Anchorage School District have been working on. It reduces child abuse and neglect. It increases family earnings. If you have stable early child care for your children, you're more likely to be able to show up to work on time, be a productive citizen, all of those things. Any one of us who's had children remembers the stress of having young children and trying to do the juggling that's involved in that. It improves school readiness. It reduces the need for special education. It reduces grade repeating, which is really important. And both of those things, I think, go to the reading readiness that the Anchorage School District has been working on. Very excited about the work there to try to make sure that we're teaching children to read when they need to know how to read in that K through 2 grade, so that by the time they get to 3rd grade, they're actually reading to learn instead of learning to read, right? I think I've heard that quite a few times from Dr. Bishop. It also reduces juvenile crime. It improves retention in higher grade levels in high school and high school graduation rates, which are really important to us. It improves post-secondary educational attainment, which, if you think about economic health, you're expected to earn about another $1 million over the course of your life if you have a college degree. Now, not everybody needs a college degree, but as many people as we can get into those information jobs, I think in the state of Alaska and in the community of Anchorage is very good. It reduces the need for public assistance. It increases your home ownership rates. It lowers your crime rates, and it improves health. And when you improve people's health, that means they can show up for work. It reduces costs. So, there's been some folks that have questioned, the fade-out effect of pre-K, and I think that, Dr. Heckman says that if you are only looking at pre-K, you're only measuring pre-K's effectiveness based on 3rd grade reading levels, you're missing a lot of important measures that are involved in pre-K. And pre-K teaches you how to solve problems. It teaches you how to interact with other people, how to manage your own self. So basically, it helps you to learn how to be a better learner, how to be a better citizen, how to be a better family member. Like, there's a lot of benefits. So you can't just be looking at third grade reading and retention. That's only one of many, I think, benchmarks that we should be looking at. And there, in addition to the Heckman work, there's also work that's been done by the Minneapolis Fed and many other folks that are looking at the economic value of pre-K. And so I just want to sort of underscore this for you as leaders in the city of Anchorage. This is a really important thing that we should be thinking about. This is not just about supporting families and children. It is about those things too, but it is also about making sure that our community is healthy, productive, learning. Our kids are ready to learn and doing all of those things. I guess I just want to mention a couple of other things. When Mr. Falsey was talking about the challenge in sort of measuring, when you talk about the need for funding, there's two things. One is, I think I'm really proud that pre-K is one of the things we were able to restore funding for this year. We worked very hard to ensure that the pre-K funding was protected. I would like to see that money increased, and there's a group of us, a bipartisan group of people in the legislature that will be working on that this next year. But social impact bonding is a really great way to explore for funding outside of the state government. And essentially what you have to do, we're looking at this with the Housing First Pay for Success model that United Way is looking at, right? You have to do the economic analysis to demonstrate that there's cost savings and then figure out how to recoup that. You need to do some front end study, and that's probably, that's potentially something that we could do at the state level. It's potentially something that could be done at the local level. Here in Anchorage, we use AgriBec to look at, what the cost savings would be in the Housing First model that United Way is doing. So we have expertise in the state of Alaska who knows how to do this. There are national experts that can guide our local economic analysts in doing that. And I would just encourage you really to be thinking about pre-K as a very important strategy for Anchorage and our children and families overall.
Yes.
I would like to add to the underscore in just a mind's eye that the Heckman study is long-standing. The children that were actually in that study have preschool children now. And so it's generational effects. So they've actually, his new research just had generational effects, that now it's the next generation. And that I do want, the state to know, as well as the city, that we have many, and Mike Fleckensteiner, Chief Information Officer, is in the room, and we have we have worked with United Way and others around the FERPA issue, and we are providing very strong data to our partners in CITC and United Way very directly, and so we can work out something in studying children, not individual,
Yeah, just to
so
add,
we are willing.
Yeah, I just want to add to that on the data front. The state has actually been doing sort of longitudinal data collection as well. We've only been doing it for about 5 years now, but we've been interviewing mothers with who are getting prenatal care and then tracking their intersection and interventions with the state over time. So we are starting to track that data on the state level. We've put the infrastructure in place to do that, so that if somebody gets a home visiting, is getting prenatal care, we're going to track their intersection with the state over the long term, and some of that data could also be used to inform analysis. Now, it's only 5 years old, but if you take that data and you bring in the body of knowledge that Dr. Heckman and many others across the country have done, there's a great sort of data trail for us to work from.
And to not talk in acronyms, FERPA is the Family Educational Rights Act, and that puts the parent in charge of the information about their child. Hence, we have to be very clear. It's very similar to HEPA, but for the educational rights and educational documentation on their children. That's what I refer to as FERPA.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that information, Representative Svanholz. I'm going to go ahead and go through the queue, and then if folks have questions for the representative or for anyone else. So I'll go ahead and start with Mr. Peterson. Yes, thank you. Mr. Constant has joined us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we've actually already come a long way. I remember about 10 years ago, I was working with Representative Guerra in the Department of Education Early Development Subcommittee, and we were trying to get some funding to start some pre-K statewide, and we managed to get it in. I believe it was 4 districts statewide. And when we were looking at the data a year or so later, we found that the demand was definitely there. There were waiting lists at all those schools for children to get into the pre-K. And so I know there's still additional demand. We still have a long way to go, but we're headed in the right direction, and we just need to continue the program, because all the data shows that it definitely saves money in the long run, and it creates success for all these children, not only while they're in school, but later in life as well. So thank you for continuing to work on that idea.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Perez-Ridio.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of quick notes. I had a question specifically regarding the Alaska Developmental Profile. I know that in terms of data, that helps us to understand both school readiness and what happens between K and 3, so that we have a better understanding of the impacts of pre-K and how that measures by school, by district. So that I'm interested in sort of where we're at with that tool. I found it that, and then the second thing is just it gives us a better sense of what happens after kindergarten. So if you're comparing kids who attend pre-K and 3rd grade reading, you're not accounting for what's happened between K and 3. Because what I have seen through the work of the United Way and the Anchorage School District is that if you actually set up a way to measure readiness using the Alaska Developmental Profile and look at our district by schools, we have schools where the numbers of kids coming into school who are physically and emotionally and academically ready are extremely low, and so that's a good marker for us to know, and then the relationship between those kids who are going to pre-K or not. But then more so, the incredible work that's happening between K and 3, so that we have schools where 10, 15, 20% of the kids are coming in that are ready, but the number of kids that are actually on track by 3rd grade is significantly higher. So I'm curious, because I know that that's a problematic tool, and in terms of implementing it and collecting it and using it, and I don't hear very much about it. And so I just wanted to get an update on sort of how we're using that. Has there been some improvements? Has there been some emphasis to make sure it's really being done in a comprehensive way, so that we can collect it and use that data in the ways that I've discussed?
Sure. Thank you. I can respond briefly. If you're wondering why kindergarten starts a week later, that's the part of that developmental profile, so that small groups of children can be assessed by their kindergarten teachers, so that we can capture those data. To give a picture of some of the children of readiness, I mean, it looks at orientation of books. Like, some kids don't even know how to orient a book. They have never seen writing on a page. And so we have the vast range of experiences, but Chelsea can certainly speak to that briefly, and if there's actual data that we can provide for you later in regard to what you said about who was ready and then who's really on grade level by 3rd grade. We have a lot of work to do still, but that is a major growth area. So.
Yeah, so the Alaska Developmental Profile, the way it's implemented now, which is a state assessment, is observation of children over a 4-week period. And then there are domains and indicators in which teachers rate children from a 0 to a 2, 2 being that they're on par for that skill for kindergarten. And then that is all compiled, so the window actually opens on Monday or Tuesday, and it will go all the way through November 1st to account for children that are coming in late, because it is supposed to be multiple data points of observation over time in order to get a full rating. Not just, I've seen this kid one time and I paid attention to it, or one time, here's the book, pass it to them upside down and see if they flip it around, right? There's social, there's gross motor, there's academic pieces to it as well. And then that information gets submitted to the state by November 1st, and then the delay is that it takes a while for the state to clean up the data, and then we are able to view it by district and compare it to the other districts in the state. One thing that I would say we do struggle with being so big is the number of teachers that are giving the assessment, and to make sure that everyone is reliable in that data, because it is observation based. So I might say that I might be a little bit harsher and say that child is a 1 where the teacher next door to me might give them a 2. So we have that variance. But the benefit of it is that it is incoming information for teachers, and they can immediately use that to know and adjust their instruction then. So the teachers shouldn't be waiting for anything because they're the ones collecting the data, right? But as far as us to get comparative data, it usually does take until the spring to get that back from the state. Yeah.
So I can just quickly follow up. I really want to emphasize that. I mean, I understand that the assessment is generally used as a formative assessment in some ways, in terms of helping the teacher to be ready to be able to serve the needs of that child.
Yeah.
But what I have not seen us do well, and I'd like to see us do better, is to be able to use it as a way to understand readiness, as a tool that's been used for decades. So we have long time of data, really rich data, to be able to show how this has changed. So I just really want to emphasize the use of that, and I think that, and I know that there's been some work through United Way to come up with ways of reporting that out to the general public in a way that allows us to both see our success and the real challenges. And we talked about data being something that, in terms of the benefits of pre-K, health benefits and economic benefits, these kinds of things. And that can be a real motivator. But what can also be a motivator is let's get real about where we are. And that when you see schools in this district that have 10%, 15% of the kids coming in ready, it really gives us a clear sense of where we're at and the realities that we're facing. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
I might also add to that the state is also, they just began the process for reviewing the early learning guidelines, which should then not just the actual guidelines themselves, but communication to families and interworking that into the community. And so I'm hopeful that will also help inform some pieces of the ADP into what you're talking about as well.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Perez-Rubio. Ms. Alito.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say that when we talk about reducing special education enrollment, it raises a yellow flag for me. Special education covers a number of students, and when we talk about the fiscal implications, special education, not to call him out, but I saw Mr. Wildton's eyebrows go up $10,000 versus $1,000. I just want to underscore the importance of that individualized education approach. It always, I don't want us to look for cost savings necessarily there. We have an obligation to our students to make sure they are identified and that they have individualized interventions. So while we want better outcomes, for our students who also require special education. So I just want to say that always raises a red flag when we're looking at that. After years of advocating for these kids, when there looks to be cost savings, special ed always seems to go on the chopping block, and we still don't have federally mandated rights to individualized educational services to meet their needs.
Dr. Bishop.
I would like to clarify, not to be a conflict, but that generally the way that it was mentioned wouldn't play out broadly. Per child of funding is really for intensive special education, which is the big money, where it's per child for IEP, and there's 6 or some things that you have to play out in regard to the needs of this child. So it's called intensive funding, which is 13 times the base allocation. All other special education money that is inclusive or learning disabled or just additional supports is given in a block grant. So the manner in which that would play out is very slim. And we do the national work on response to intervention, or MTSS, is about the avoidance of having to reteach because we were disorganized. We want to early intervene because a lot of these skills, and not only what's happening to children is that they're missing out on a very broader experience of education when they're having to remediate. So it's not only a school district issue, it's nothing about funding for me, because the money for special education and LD, learning disabled, very minor things that we're talking about that preschool avoids or preschool can help not happen. To your example of they're getting into preschool because they were just behind, they just didn't know what they didn't know, but they do not have a cognitive difference in their ability. It's just they weren't given the opportunity to learn it. So that's the majority of special education in our district, and that is provided by a block grant on the number of kids you have total. So the manner in which that would play out, I agree with you that we're not using anything to avoid, money. It's just that there's two different categories and they're very two different things. And probably early intervention for a child that is intensive, that child will most likely remain intensive through our system, and so the funding would remain the same. There are times that we move out, but very slim chance of because they really literally are cognitive or physical disabilities that they do need these additional supports. We're talking about the avoidance of learning disabled, which is a minor, perhaps maybe not given the opportunity, but not really a cognitive differentiation. So I want to be clear that just to that comment, I agree, but I think there's the understanding of everyone is just different.
Really quickly, there are some learning disabilities that are just not going to go away with early intervention. And so I just want to be clear that we just have an obligation to meet each kid where they are, assess them, figure out if they have a disability, and then to move forward. Early intervention will not just help kids with disabilities overcome their disabilities. There may be some, it's more than the intervention, and it's not specialized instruction. So it raises a yellow flag. I don't want to see, the idea of cost savings to the detriment of these students.
Thank you, Ms. Alberto. Mr. Posey?
Yeah, and I just wanted to jump in and clarify. I do think we are all on the same page.
Yeah.
My brother was in special ed. My mom was a special ed teacher at Rabbit Creek Elementary. No one's trying to short the special ed program. I raised that because that was the financial engine that allowed Salt Lake City and Chicago to borrow the money. And the question for us is, do we have a similar engine? Maybe we don't, and maybe then we're just back to the conversation that we got to find the money somewhere, and no one's just going to give it to us. But if there is a way to get people out of that population who never really should have been in, because if they'd had PK, they never would have been behind, then maybe there's something there, and that's what we were interested in.
Thank you, Mr. Posey. Mr. Weddleton.
A comment and then a question. It's very risky watching my eyebrows go up. In fact, it was not the high cost of special ed, which I understand, but when I think Bill was making just an order of magnitude comparison, suggested that the $1,000 cost for a student, which I know doesn't exist in our so that was that cheap. But a question, we're talking about special ed and how we would help, but money we put into, not special ed, I'm sorry, preschool. Money we put into preschool, does that go against the maximum amount we're allowed to provide for school?
No, it could be outside the formula because it's not funded already, so we could get.
Outside the formula, but it's not funded already.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be an in-kind, it wouldn't go against the basic needs. So that is an area for which we could receive support, like transportation, like food service.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. President Marcet.
I also, as kind of been brought up, but wanted to touch on the special education. And, I have been very involved in the special education community, and I don't believe that we are just moving kids into SPED because they're behind. They may need additional supports. We need to catch them up. But I don't want the public to think that we're just taking kids that are coming in and putting them in SPED because they're behind, because we're not. There is quite a process in evaluating those children, and a lot of times it's just bringing them up to speed, getting them some extra help that they need, and there is quite the process to be able to receive special education.
Yes, Representative.
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing to this whole sort of SPED conversation. I adopted a child who's on the fetal alcohol spectrum, who's a SPED kid. She was always going to be a SPED kid. I adopted, she joined my family when she was 9, and so we didn't get the benefit of, some of the earlier programs. But what we know is that regardless of whether you have some kind of a learning disability or you don't, there's a lot of change that's happening in one's brain when you are under the age 5. We're born with trillions of neural pathways, and there's a process of pruning that happens as our brain develops. We figure out we don't need these neural pathways, and we focus in on the things that we do need in order to be most productive. And so, exposure to language, learning, self-management and social skills, learning problem solving, all of those things help make sure that young children are pruning the right pathways, and they're pruning the wrong ones, and they're developing the right ones. And if we don't provide children with really high quality education, really from prenatal phase all the way up through post-secondary education, then we're harming their brain development. We're risking their sort of brain development for the rest of their lives. And so it's a real opportunity, whether they're on the special education end of the spectrum or they're gifted. It doesn't really matter. Every child's brain is growing, and very important brain development is happening in these ages, and we want to make sure that we're capitalizing on it so that Anchorage in 2050 or in 2100 is a remarkable place with really dynamic workforce and citizens.
Thank you. Ms. Hilt.
Thank you. I just wanted, I've always been a big supporter of early intervention, and it's been wonderful in my own family, and we were able to avoid sped needs, even though we were clearly on that path, because it does all the things Representative Sponford has talked about. We use the term rewiring brains. So I hope we're all clear on that part. But as we talk about our budget in the school district going forward, I hope this discussion will be on your mind. The school district is providing more services to more students. Ms. Morrow's department is wonderful, but it's a department, right? So we hear those numbers from the public, oh, we got more administrators here, or this program here. There are more students being served, and in a way that will say, as Mr. Falsey said, provide an economic return. So I just, respectfully asking that be a part of how you talk to your constituents.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Mr. Dunn.
As we examine the data metrics that argue in favor of expanding pre-K, I think we should also consider some of the other major areas that we need to improve in. We have, by statute, some of the shortest school days of any state in the union. We have one of the shortest school years of any state in the union, and the accumulated effects of those over a K through 12 education could be quite dramatic. Additionally, we could go to a more intensive phonics-based reading curriculum in K through 2, such as a Spalding. That would be quite expensive to do, but it would absolutely be successful because we see proven examples of that within our own district. So there's other things that we should look at the data metrics of what the return on the investment would be and consider them all together and do a cost analysis comparison.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. I don't see any other questions on this topic. We'll go ahead and move on. And just note to the members, we have about 30 minutes left and quite a few topics left on our agenda. So we're going to have to go quickly. Yeah, Ms. Medeiros.
Thank you. Sorry, someone mentioned this earlier, but do we have an estimate of how much it would cost, if we even know the demand, but how much it would cost to actually fulfill the demand for pre-K?
In your white paper, we put, if we were to add 2 pre-Ks, it might not fill all the demand, but it would do a dent. We did all pre-K as well as just 2 classrooms per school. It's in the white paper. It's in there. I mean, you could do it. It is $21,665,000 for 2 classrooms per elementary school. If we were to broaden to every child, but again, universal preschool is not the school district response. Usually these places have had, Falsey shared, multitude of different avenues. So you don't want to take away your private enterprise of preschools in your community. It's usually a shared, but if you were to do every single child that possibly in a grade level that would matriculate, it would be $49 million.
So it's somewhere between those 2 figures.
Correct, and the reason is those are smaller class sizes with aides because of the high quality regulations. They're different regulations than K-12.
And how much are we currently spending?
We would, I would provide that number because all the different funding sources, we'd have to get them all together. Some are grant, some are not, and we could have that total number for you.
I'm just curious what that gap is.
Yes, okay, that's a great question. We'll get that for you.
Thank you, Ms. Davidson. All right, so we're going to go ahead and go back to item 6, comprehensive plan. And we're going to start with item 6B, Safe Student Transportation Committee update. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. LaFrance to frame the discussion and then to the district.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So these 2 items, you all likely recall, are a follow-up from our last meeting where we discussed walkability concerning and safe routes concerning Service High and Mears Middle School. And there's a recap actually in the white paper of that discussion and action. But we've had some community questions as to what was the outcome of those conversations and the outcome of the meetings that have since, or meeting that has since been held. And I think at this point, maybe the ASD, I see Dr. Bishop has stepped out, can maybe speak to the outcome of the Safe Student Transportation Committee meeting as that originally started as the hazardous route committee meeting.
I think Mr. Roth.
Yeah, so I'm prepared, and I've also asked, come on up here, Heather. Ms. Heather Philp, who is our Senior Director of Student Transportation. So in your packet, you'll see that you do have a copy of the minutes, and we're happy to go into those discussions. I guess my question though, and this would be our point of consideration to the group. So at the last meeting, it was agreed by show of hands by both bodies to establish a hazardous routes to school committee. But there's an existing group that already exists, and Member LaFrance and I believe Member Weddleton attended that. So the question, and I guess it's a little bit of confusion on our part. So the focus of that body that existed, that does exist, really is focused on student safety en route school, walking paths primarily. They look at bus stops as an example along routes if there are concerns about that. So this panel exists, and I would tell you that the process works. There have been many cases where Ms. Philp, our safety staff, have met with the transportation department staff on sites. Mears is an example, service, a number of other schools, and they do work through these matters. Now, where the confusion lies, again, the focus is generally on the student piece, but there's a broader piece where when you involve modifications to roadways and the like, that the district really doesn't have the ability to bird dog. So I guess the question is, if we're looking to expand this focus of the panel, which goes beyond, again, what I think is really kind of student-centric to more infrastructure, then we're probably not the right agency. It could be a transportation department focused to lead that effort. We certainly want to be a part of that conversation. We want to be engaged in it, but we don't have the ability, if it's infrastructure related, we don't have the ability to execute those to completion.
Thank you. President Marseille.
Well, and in this resolution, it says, whereas the pupil transportation department has reinstated the hazardous transportation committee, that was never our committee to begin with. And so that's my confusion also, as I know we've been part of that committee.
I think it was several senior directors and directors past that recognized that there was a need and brought this body. It was a joint group that came together, but again, the problems that were addressed and if they arrived at solutions, if it was an infrastructure, say a crossing, lights at an intersection, that once they've identified the need, that the right actors would take the lead on completing certain requirements. If it's like crossing guards, if it's disciplining students to cross where you're supposed to cross, then that would be more of a school district action. And the process to initiate is like a member of LaFrance has identified. Parents generally will identify issues to the panel, and it would go to the Senior Director of Student Transportation, and she can use people to address it. That's what I think works with the current system.
Thank you, Madam President. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So last time's discussion seemed to point to a broader policy discussion, and President Marcet referred to a draft of a resolution, and the intent with this resolution was just to start fleshing out what tools already exist or how these kinds of questions and issues have been handled. So it references the Safe Routes to Schools manual, which is a joint effort between the People Transportation Department and the Community Traffic Department, as well as the Hazardous Transportation Committee, which I may have misunderstood, I thought was owned by the People Transportation Department. But that said, given our refocus on 4 areas in the charter that we're supposed to be addressing at our quarterly meetings, the comprehensive plan, right, is one of those areas. And it seems like, given the need for policy solutions, or at least to work with the community on these issues, perhaps this is a good point to look at the comprehensive plan. And I know John or Mr. Weddleton has brought his copy, and I realize we don't have it. And also, mention that there's a section in it concerning the non-motorized plan. So maybe one solution is for the committee, whoever owns it, to make recommendations when the 2 tools won't solve the problem. The 2 tools being recommending busing or additional crossing guards. And I think as far as the way in which the 2 bodies address these community issues remains to be fleshed out. And so the resolution is just kind of an attempt to figure out where are we at and how do we move this into, if you all feel it's appropriate, the comprehensive plan. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. LaFrance. Mr. Weddleton.
All right, thanks. It would seem crazy, but it's in fact the truth. When you put these kinds of transportation, walking and biking off on are there transportation professionals here like Ryan or no one from DOT? That's too bad. But when you give it to them, you get answers like this. When we were at that meeting, there was someone from DOT or city planning there, and there's a crosswalk at Mears that the kids don't use because it's about 50 yards from where they naturally will go. They're let out of the building on this side, the crosswalk's over there. And the answer was, you need to educate them to use that. Or you can move the crosswalk to where they naturally would go. That makes sense. That's total sense. But a transportation planner doesn't think that way. We can't let transportation planners rule our transportation. It's sadly true. So what we were looking for in the committee, and I think we just misunderstood, we didn't really know. We said, okay, we have issues. You're busing someone for 45 minutes to get across the street at Service High. If there's anyone here who doesn't see that as absurd, we'll talk, because that makes no sense. It may be where you are, but it makes no sense. And it is the way it is because there was not enough push when they planned the recent rebuild of Abbott to say, make it so they can cross the street when it's time to cross that street. And we need the power of ASD to make that statement when it's time to make that statement. And we missed it for 20 years or more on Abbott. It's a darn shame, and we're missing it time and time again. And we need ASD to say, move your crosswalk. You put it in the wrong place. And you guys have a lot of clout to say that. It's your crosswalk for your kids. Tell them to move the crosswalk, and I'll tell you, you will get us to back you up, okay? So that hazardous routes to school, it has a different mission. And we went there, and I think, Suzanne, I realized, okay, you're just looking at the way things are now. Is it safe? What do? You have 2 tools, bus them, or use cross guards. So I kind of walked away, okay, do that, that's fine. But we need more than that from the school district. Now, we have in the planning works right now a non-motorized plan. And I understand they have the safe routes to schools stuff, okay, which is somewhat useful. But they need to see if they have it. Where do you deem dangerous? That needs to be sent to that planning group right now so that they can say, okay, this is dangerous, and how are we going to fix it with this important plan? And we really need school district there. And I know you guys are busy doing lots of stuff, but in my time as an advocate for this, where's ASD comes up a lot. And I think our effort here is to say, how do we get you guys on board without overburdening you? Because there's always transportation stuff going on. And it does take continuous effort.
To your point, I think that where kids naturally go will be where they go, especially 13 and 14-year-olds. So we're not going to necessarily discipline and behavior out of them. Young adolescents will do that. So I think that we can add those to when we need to go, to be made aware of it, to go, a lot of times it could be that we just didn't know what we didn't know, that we had a voice there. So, but there are concerns, and we do know patterns of children that we can add value to those, and we'd be happy to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Ms. Alto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Robinson, is there somewhere in road projects that we could advocate for a transportation planner to reach out? Is there any natural place in those projects? I'm just talking about looking for expertise. And I'm thinking of there's going to be there's some plans in place for Fire Week, and there's North Star Elementary and Stellar secondary school there. And so is there some natural spot we could be having them reach out to the district at least, so then we're not placing onus on the district, but on the transportation planner?
I imagine on any of those, they'll do mailings to stakeholders, and at least a postcard goes to, each of those schools, and the principal puts it in his stack, and it's like most of us do. So it is really hard to get people involved. So it is almost
A direct call.
Could be, and I know you're not disinterested in this, and I understand it's difficult. We're just looking, how do we ramp it up? But it should be, so at least it's going to be in the stakeholder, honestly, on the end. I can't say, it depends on the consultant hired to do the contact. Depends on who's at a particular school. If you have an active parent in the PTA, you can get active participation. So I don't know how we institutionalize that so that every contact gets good.
Thank you, Ms. Alto. Mr. Constant.
I think the way we institutionalize it is it's in two phases. One is we have a comprehensive assessment that we conduct that does that. Tell us all the places you have that are threats right now to students. And then we begin a conversation with the planning department on these are the areas in the short term we need to deal with. Phase two is with the planners and the school district and our team saying, okay, so how do we institutionalize this? And that will produce the process by which we get this. I think that's really how we do it. Because once we see a backlog of all these initiatives and the planners realize, oh my God, it's going to take us 5 or 10 years to fix, they're going to want to be in front of it so that they can one day just have it be part of every project.
And just as part of that, if you get that list of hazardous routes and crosswalks in the wrong place to this non-motorized plan, then it's in a document that will be referred to in every road project. So that you're kind of in there now. So now is the time, though, because they're fairly far. They expected to release it this past summer, but it's been delayed. So there is time to release it for comment. So you are totally, this is not bad timing to get everything you can think of to the planner.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Thank you, Mr. Whittleton. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I hope that Mr. Whittleton's words sort of, and then follow-up contact after, so really do spur the school district to sort of immediately act. It sounds like there is a little bit of a time factor. But I also wanted to ask a question about this resolution that Ms. LaFrance spoke to a little bit. So the process here, I'm asking a process question. So you've got these sort of two, section 1, section 2 that are still blank. It sounds like it's a little bit time sensitive to get it done. I don't think we can pass one of these resolutions to our next joint meeting. Is that right? So I guess I would ask the chair or whomever else, what's the plan to get this actually done and passed?
Yeah, I would have to defer to Ms. LaFrance. I don't know, what's your plan to get this done?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's been suggested by legal that the bodies individually pass resolutions and that the school board considers passing one is important and we do one on our own.
Okay, great. So that's great because we don't have to wait till our next joint meeting. I think Mr. Constant has laid out some of the things that can go into section 1 and hopefully we can identify some other things as well. But I'm certainly very supportive of this and I hope the school board members are as well.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Ms. Hill.
It's late, but I was just, from Mr. Wendelson's perspective, if you do this non-motorized plan and it says we want to be more walkable, does that not already advise the DOT on taking into consideration how you're going to fit across the street on Abbott versus us identifying? I mean, that's a pretty onerous task, going through each school and looking at every possible point of contention versus when they're doing a project, say, how are kids gonna be affected by this? Does your plan, you think, direct those considerations?
DOT wants to move more cars faster, so no, you'll have no impact on DOT. What it would do, the motorized plan is much more than, hey, we need people to walk around. It'll actually have projects in there. Typically, they'll be fairly specific. But largely if it happened, DOT can accommodate in some ways, but they're not likely to. It would be, if you want that, the city has to pay. So we'd have to do try to coordinate with their project and bond something to make it make sense. More likely. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it eliminates some challenges.
Thank you, Ms. Hildy, and thank you, Mr. Littleton. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a member of the public from Alaska PTA who wanted to provide a comment. Zaid?
My name is April Eide, E-I-D-E. I'm Alaska PTA President-elect, but I'm also the Mears PTSA President. And I've been at the school for almost this is my 4th year. We've had 3 students hit at the intersection of 100th and Victor. And when I attended the last joint meeting, I was very thankful to hear that a committee, or after that meeting, a committee was going to be reinstated or formed. And I attended that meeting, which was, great because it does, benefit kids, being the Alaska PTA, being for every child. It was only for busing and adding cross guards, which from DOT said that even a crossing guard deems this intersection hazardous. But there's crosswalks, which everyone, parents have questioned, well, if there's crosswalks, why can't we cross here? According to Safe Routes, there's only the one side of the road that they could cross, but then the rest of the ways, not allowed. New signs have been added, and, which is great too, because I was told that signs were going to be added. But when I first started this process, I contacted the municipality, which then took me to ASD, and now it's back to, I guess, the municipality to make the decision on what needs to be done at the intersection. They've done a traffic light study. I have not heard, what the status of that is. But just a couple weeks ago, a 3rd student was hit. So for the past 3 years, 3 students have been hit. This last one happened about 6 o'clock at night. I don't know, there was no report filed. I guess the lady that hit the student left the scene, was found down the road, came back, but the parents, told her she could go. Why that happened, I don't know. But that happened just before a PTSA meeting. So hopefully, ASD promotes walk to school day, bike to school day. And if there's this intersection that is deemed hazardous, we need to find out what can be done. Will the signs be posted, when it's these events? But right now, according to ASD, no one should be crossing north of 100th, and they should all be bused, which is not right. We need to let kids walk or bike. Thank you.
Sure. Ms. Quinn-Davidson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to thank you for being here and for raising this issue. And I had not heard about the 3rd student, and I whispered to Ms. LaFrance, and I don't think she had either.
August 29th.
For bringing that to our attention. I know that we all emailed quite a bit ago with Stephanie Marmillo, and she was looking into signage. Is there something we can do while we're all here? I mean, perhaps Mr. Falsey following up with Stephanie, or how can we help support you to get the information or the response you need, because we appreciate what you're doing.
Find out if a street light or flashing beacon or what's going to be done. Parents, or maybe getting out to the community that there's a stop sign to watch for people crossing, because it's not just students. There's adults that walk, cross this intersection with kids, bikes, all day long, evening time, all year. So it's just more of just getting, we could try to educate the students, but they need to be more focusing on what they're going to school for, reading, writing, math, to try to add teachers to teach them how to use crosswalks. Maybe that gets added, early on in the school, career, but find out what the traffic report or traffic light study was, and if something is going to be happening in that area.
So is your understanding that, I know it was probably 2 months ago when we were all emailing with Stephanie and trying to figure this out, have you not really heard any follow-up then since that time?
No.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Davidson. Mr. Constant.
Thank you. I don't know who would answer this question. It's not something we get the answer to today, but this is one school and one intersection. Many schools and many intersections. And I'm wondering, in the context of all of the schools and intersections, if this is in fact the one or one of the top ones, or if there are other schools that are experiencing even more impacts like this, because I think as much as it's great to have an advocate in PTSA here from that school, I know that there are schools that are surrounded by highways and that are challenged as well. And so if we're going to be addressing problems specific to intersections, I would like it to be done equitably to where the problem is at the most, right? And so let's make sure that we look comprehensively at this problem if we can.
I'd like to add Diamond High School. I brought up, briefly, but only because, I know it costs money, getting people out there to do studies, but 88th and Arlene, right by Diamond High School, similar situation. A student was hit there just last school year. So, but I'm in the area, my kids went to Sound Lake, Mears, and Diamond. Sound Lake, that intersection, they have a crossing guard. There's a traffic light, but people still run the light, and the crossing guard last school year was hit. So it's, kind of does come down to, getting more police over there during school hours, not necessarily posting, up at the corners, but observing, parents, maybe it's repeat, people running light or, running the light or running stop signs. And all these have happened during bright days, so it's not even winter time or early morning or, when it's dark, so. And being in Alaska PTA, I could reach out to all the other schools and find out if there's, if there's any concerns for those areas, and could get that to you guys.
I think that's great. I just know that there are some schools that have challenges even organizing PTSAs because they're working 3 jobs and they just can't afford the time because they need to pay for their kids' food. And so definitely a database approach is important. I like the self-report and the database approach, and maybe that's with APD or someone else because those maps are sure exist.
Thank you, Mr. Monson. Ms. LaFrance.
I move to extend to 12:15.
Moved and seconded. Any opposition to that? We'll get through the rest of these as quick as we can. Thanks, everyone. All right. Thank you for speaking with us. So moving on to item 7C, pool use update from the municipality. Who is for this one? Someone from the school district presenting? Oh, sure, Mr. Presbyterian.
I don't really have a presentation, but I can sort of refer over to Dean and the superintendent. I can just say that at our last meeting there was an inquiry as to whether we, as a municipality, could waive pool fees at a particular school or for particular types of classes, and Member Dyson and I agreed to do work on this, and so we've been working with Dean on it and working with the superintendent, gathering all the information necessary to be able to put forth a resolution to the assembly, and it looks like we're getting close. There's been a lot of back and forth conversations and emails and gathering of information. I think part of the delay was the timing. It was prior to school starting, and the people who were necessary to get the information from weren't available and that sort of thing. But I think now we've gotten most of the information, and Dean is working on it, and we'll have something in draft form soon. So, but Dean, do you want to add anything to that?
I think you covered pretty well, Mr. President.
I'd like to just mention a particular thing about the rules in regard to the funding situation, and Jim can just reference it. We think we have a solution, but just some knowledge about how much ASD pays the municipality according to in-kind and how it will affect our basic need and the contribution from the city. So just a brief, we know we can have a solution, but.
Yes, so I'm Jim Anderson, CFO. We spend about $270,000 a year for pool fees. Because we've been paying them year after year for quite some time, if the city were to automatically say no more pool fees, then technically, if we don't do a little bit more work, we'd have to count that as in-kind revenue, and at the end of the day, it would all balance out. So we know that we got to work with the municipality on the actual cost for the number of hours that we used, and then we can subtract that from the $270,000. So if it goes through, at the end of the day, we can work this out, and but it'll take a little bit more work, and we're willing to do that if this is the way the assembly wants to go. It saves just that little bit more chunk towards educating our students. So
the expense would be the actual expense for electricity and other things. That would be the differentiation that we could. So from 270, it could be reduced to about 50,000 for the actual cost of the city, and that's what we're talking about. So there's always complex issues in regard to doing something good.
Yeah, and just a clarification, the initial request was for one school to offer classes, and so the conversation has expanded to the possibility of life skills classes as well. So I think we're still in that process of figuring that out. But yeah, it sounds like we're getting close, and we should have something for the assembly to look at soon.
Thank you, Mr. Prince. Mr. Holland.
Yes, and this is a little bit of a point of clarification. I accept blame for starting this whole question a while back. And it was just something that bothered me years ago when we eliminated swim classes. And what I did was look for principals that would put it on their schedule and sign students into it, because there's this chicken and egg problem. Coming to the assembly and asking for use of the pools to do swim classes when those schools are offering swim classes is pretty hard to get rolling. And when I bumped into Frank Alzer's service, he was overly enthusiastic about it. I mean, he really wanted to do it. And my idea was, if he was going to do that, then we had the winter and spring to work out the details, and we would know sometime in the summer whether or not they could actually do it. And somewhere around November 30th, things got unusually busy last winter. And in the spring, budget issues were a little bit more knotty than we are accustomed to. But Mr. Hauser did have it on the schedule for students to sign up for in January, and they have enrolled students. My original request was for all schools that were near a pool to be able to offer swim classes and get access to the pool without a cost area for just the swim classes. But I recently have asked if the administration can consider granting a waiver just for service for at least this fall and maybe spring, because they actively have kids enrolled, and use it as a test to see what the impacts on staffing are. How difficult is this logistically for pools to be there, to have the staff they need at the right time for our people to be in. Service has been doing dry exercises with this group of enrolled students, waiting to see if we could have a quick resolution. And so the one school question was strictly in response to the fact that we have one school that has students enrolled. And when Mr. Hauser said he'd do it, I didn't go around and try to get 5 other principals as well. I can see where this is way more complicated than anybody wants to think it is on its surface. So that is kind of a pressing need. We have students in a swim class that have yet to get wet, get their feet wet. And if that could be addressed rapidly by the administration with encouragement from the assembly, that would be awesome. The larger question of whether or not we can do this in a way that works out fiscally is something that everybody's working on, and I know that takes some time. So,
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Howell. Mr. Gates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In gathering information on this, maybe one little clarification for Mr. Anderson. It sounded like the estimated $270,000 a year was the total amount for all high school use of swim pools, including the the swim teams, not just classes and so forth. So the actual amount that we're talking about, we're just waiving fees for the basic swimming one and life school swimming classes, which is, I understand, is the ask. That might be a much lesser amount involved.
It would be
might be an amount that we don't have yet, because if there's only one school offering those classes, maybe we're talking about 5 other high schools having a waiving fees that are in addition to the 270,000. So there's a little bit to figure out. And then I wanted to add on the other end of this equation is the Parks and Rec department. If they're losing some revenue, if it's just in-kind revenue, maybe it's not real loss. If it's some actual dollars, then we need to figure out on the Parks and Rec side how to fill that gap for the department.
So the 270,000 is the entire district. I don't have the numbers just for one school swim classes, but we'll work on that.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Ms. Hilda.
Yeah, I just want to do a clarifying thing. That 270 is not for like kids to sign up for high school swimming class, right? It's a very limited amount of students in our district taking swimming right now. The idea being that more students have access to swim lessons. That number would understandably be higher, and I don't think we have those numbers. My confusion was, somebody mentioned in kind, so if you did allow us just to offer this at every high school that could do it, am I hearing that would just reduce the municipal contribution to our district?
Jim, can you speak to that? Because of the pattern that we've already had, it is somewhat cumbersome. So the in-kind and how that fluctuates with our maximum allowable from the school.
Right. One, I have to go back and look strictly for swim classes that may be outside of school and see if it even applies. I was looking purely at the total amount that we spend. So if we have a history of spending, whether it's utilities or pool rental, because the 270 does include swim teams, competitions, everything. If we have paid this consistently over time, and now the city decides we don't have to pay it again, then we would count that as an in-kind revenue, much like Kenai. So the city of Kenai, they show up at deed as only getting 93% of what the borough can give them. They actually get 100% because they get their utilities covered, their maintenance covered. So those things that allow the district to operate during the normal school day as part of the scheduled curriculum, those things, even if the city were to cover part of that, we would count that as an in-kind revenue.
Even with an increase in opportunity services.
What I have to get smarter on this particular slice at service, so I can't talk to that right now, sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. All right, seeing no other questions on this topic, we'll go ahead and move on to item 7D, MOA Climate Action Plan Update. So unfortunately, and obviously we don't have time to go into this in detail, but our staff experts couldn't be here today to talk about the Climate Action Plan. So I've asked the clerk's staff to coordinate and find time to do a joint work session of the two bodies to go over the Climate Action Plan and see how we can collaborate and what the school district can do to align with the plan. For today, I have provided copies, if we could have them passed out, please, of the Climate Action Strategy document, which is a document that's derived from the plan itself. So if board members want to review that, and then we'll work on scheduling a work session. Moving on to item 7E, this is just a heads up kind of item. We have talked a lot about cost saving strategies in this setting, and AML is putting on a workshop on Wednesday, October 9th for municipal and school district officials on this exact topic. I don't have further details, but I'll make sure that the clerk's staff can send out the invite to all of the parties. It sounds like it's going to be an interesting workshop. And with that, we'll go ahead and move it on to item 7F, ASD Strategic Plan and Goal Setting Process.
And excuse me, I'll speak to that, Chair. We are in the process, as we all know, 90/20 is coming to an end, and the school district and the board is in the process of developing our goals for the next 5 years, 6 years. And our importance on this is we really want to involve the community, because it does take the community to do what we need to do. So we have scheduled a preliminary meeting on September 16th, and it sent out letters to key individuals to be part of the strategic planning meeting, to look at our process, to give us input. ADEC, Bridge Builders, group from the ministry, Health Association, Native Community, and United Way. We had also sent one to the mayor, to the office of the mayor. And I know you guys get a lot of things, but we have yet to receive any input on that as to whether the municipality will be sending someone to this meeting. I think it's very important as a partner with ASD that we have someone attend. So I don't know if you guys who received the letter. Yes.
Oh, I just, Madam President, Ira, and I'm going to mispronounce the last name, Slomsky Pritz, as RSVP'd.
And when was that? Today?
When I responded, I think it might have been yesterday, I responded, I didn't copy you, but I know your emails are swamped.
So, yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Madam President. We got that resolved.
Yes.
Hold on. Yes, Mr. Johnson.
It is the 16th, Monday from 11 to 1.
So I just think that, and it's not me, so it can be nobody, but the assembly might be wise as well to send it somewhere. So
Yeah, it's an open meeting.
I don't know that we received that invitation, but someone might want to volunteer themselves if they have the bandwidth to do that because.
Sure. So if Clerk Steph, we can go ahead and just notice the meeting, just in case multiple, since it is a public meeting, we'll just go there. And then if there's anyone interested, we'll have that noticed.
At the admin building?
Yes, it'll be at the Ed Center in the boardroom, and we will provide lunch.
All right, great. Thank you, Mr. Constant. All right, so that brings us to member comments. I'll go ahead, just start on this side of the room, and then if there are any members that want to speak, they can do so. So, Mr. Dyson.
Just well done. I've been recently really impressed with all the things the district is doing to help kids with huge emotional and learning disabilities. And I don't know of anything that could be done more than what they're doing. The care and tenderness and dedication of those teachers is amazing to me.
Thank you. Did you want to add any final words, Dr. Michelle?
No, Chair, thank you for letting me speak so much already.
Thank you, no problem. Ms. Snelly. Michaela, excuse me.
No comments. I'm
Excuse
good.
me.
Keep it going.
All right, thank you, Ms. Michaelis. Mr. Holliday.
No comment.
Thank you, Mr. Holliday. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to follow up on a little bit with something that Mr. Welton mentioned. He and I are on the AMAP committee together, and when you're talking about making changes to traffic patterns, whether it's pedestrians or building additional streets or whatever, it takes much longer to make changes than you would expect. Just as an example, when Beggage Middle School was built over in East Anchorage along DeBar Road, there was no blinking yellow light planned for that area. And so when I was in the legislature, Senator Wilkowski and I managed to get funding to have that light installed. And it only took 4 years after we got the funding for the light to actually be installed. And if you had ever been driving down DeBar Road near Beggage Middle School when school got out, it was absolutely the Wild West. And so how no one was killed or injured, I don't know. But since we got the blinking yellow light, it's not as bad as it used to be. It's less dangerous, to put it that way. So yes, it takes longer than you would expect. So if you're hoping to get something changed when it comes to the DOT and Department of Transportation, plan ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Wise words. Ms. Allentown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just say that we need to keep educating the public about the hands-free cell phones in the school zone, because I'm seeing it a lot during my school pickup and drop-off. So as you're at community councils and PTA and the like, please keep reiterating it. And if you need fact sheets, let us know. The clerk's office made us a wonderful fact sheet about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Allentown. Mr. Dunlap. No comment. Thank you, Mr. Dunlap. Ms. Quinn Davidson.
I just have a question. So is it still, are you all holding your meetings on Tuesdays now? And did we talk about this before I came? No. So can you tell me why? Because it strikes me that reduces the public's ability to weigh in with both bodies and sort of what the plan is. Eugene is really loving this. What the plan is moving forward and why you did that, if there's time.
So, as the chair, we did meet as a board and talked about changing our school board meetings, making them earlier so that more people could attend, having our work sessions on one night. And as far as having them on Monday, it's really, we found that a lot of our staff was coming in on the weekend to prepare for our school board meetings. And when we polled board members, Tuesday was just more of an optimal time for us to meet. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, when we were looking at the schedule, we chose the first and the third Tuesdays, thinking that you always met on the second and the fourth Tuesdays. And it wasn't until August that we realized that you don't have that set a schedule. So we were trying to be on the opposite Tuesdays from you. We had already announced the meetings at that point for the year, and we felt that we couldn't change it. But I think, obviously, we should try to fix that going forward.
Yeah, I think, if I can, Mr. Chair, I think in September sometime, maybe it's next meeting or October, is when we approve our schedule for the following year, or when is that?
Sometime soon.
So, and you haven't set your meetings for next year yet?
For next year?
For the school year 2021, we have not set them yet.
2021.
For
Yeah.
the school year 1920, we have them set, so through May.
I would request, could you, if you want to piggyback on ours, maybe that's not fair, maybe we should set ours on yours, but I think there needs to, Chris disagreed, I think there needs to be some coordination, so is there a way for, I don't know who your correct representative is, but to work with our clerk to make sure those meetings are not on the same nights? I mean, there's 4 Tuesdays in the week, so we might as well just meet.
It's 4 Tuesdays in the month.
I'm really good with timing.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Davidson, for bringing this issue up, and hopefully we can get this issue resolved offline. Mrs. Franks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just add to the chair's comments at the beginning of the meeting about the new agenda format. At some point, not necessarily now, I'd be curious to hear feedback on that layout and if you think it works. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. France. Mr. Wellington. Thank you, Mr. Wellington. President Marcel.
I just want to say thank you to the Assembly and the municipality for working with us on so many projects, and we value our partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Ms. Bellet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Conson.
I wasn't going to say this, but our calendar is pretty complex in that we have to balance budget timelines and getting things on the ballot. Every year, the clerk's office works really hard to get the days just lined up so that everything can happen. And so it's not as simple as looking at their calendar and our calendar. Just what offered it. It's pretty complex.
It's more complex than I realized. I didn't even know we did all this.
So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conson.
Thank you. In the past, we had mentioned something about multi-year bonds, and the district looking at that would incorporate into our multi-year bond planning. There's some concern on how that might impact the municipality and your bond planning, and as Member Davidson mentioned, how do we coordinate what that looks like? So I hope we can talk about that. If we do it this year, that would perhaps have an immediate impact on you. Or so I don't know if you've considered that, or done it into any of your planning, or considered how if we did it, it might affect you. So I'm not sure how to go forward on that, but.
We're happy to have that conversation. The initial question for us is if we did multi-year bonds, the school district would do one bond for the next 2 years, and likewise, we're going to go some sort of off-cycle. So the initial design question is who starves in the first year? And I don't know how to get through that. So if you guys have had thoughts on that.
I got an idea, but.
So we're happy to have that conversation, but I have not heard a solution to that problem.
So you would be the contact point?
I think so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Felsen. That's healthy. Ms. Mitchell.
I really appreciate these meetings, and I think that there's some very important issues that we're talking about, and it requires partnership between the district and the community, so I really appreciate this.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Mr. Dunn.
I think it'd be easier for us to move our meetings than for you all to move your meetings. We ought to be doing that and getting back so the public doesn't have this conflict. I've advocated that in public meetings already.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to everyone. I appreciate these meetings as well, and I really appreciated the information regarding the buildings, facilities, and all the earthquake repairs. And one thing that you brought up that I don't think we've really had much of a conversation about is the idea of the philosophical controversy between the idea of building to life safety standards versus building to structural preservation standards, and there's a huge amount of money that goes in between those two. But what I really appreciated was bringing up the fact that the buildings did operate and function in the way that they were intended to. But I also just appreciate the fact that you recognize that there's going to be a balance between doing that again and the high cost of what insurance companies might prefer. So anyway, I appreciate the thought behind all of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. So I'll go ahead and open it up to audience participation. Yes, sir.
My name is Eugene Colhaven. I'll be short my introduction and say I owe the public process. I was the one that addressed the assembly in July and reported these words: school board meetings are not for the public. That was stated by a representative of the school board during election time at a community council meeting in Eagle River. That policy, school board meetings are not for the public, was shown in the respect that I informed the Anchorage Assembly at a regular meeting that they are scheduling in August to move their dates to Tuesday nights. The fact is, it was in July that I reported the scenario, and what has transpired, we're in September, the middle of September, and they've already experienced with several meetings that the public has to choose between one and the other. As a fact of moving and figuring out your calendar and having it the same on Tuesdays, let me remind you on the Assembly has special meetings, including the certification of the election night. That's going to be an alternate Tuesday or a Monday or whatever. The fact is, you can't have that. You've got to move out of that scenario. And this was contemptible. There was a chance of the Assembly members in July to get to the school board and stop it in its tracks. That did not happen. I heard from Assembly members that said to me on the sidebar that, what's going on, but the fact is nothing was done, and the failure is resulted in closing is Tuesday night was an Assembly meeting. There were a lot of issues there. The content information was not reported, I understand, by KTU or KTVA. KTVA was not at the Assembly meeting. There were election ordinances that were left that Tuesday night. Several substance issues that were addressed by the Assembly, and including the University of Alaska that was laid on the table. But the public wasn't in the dark unless they listened to the video audio. I'm thankful for that. But the fact is, there was a conflict in the swimsuit issue that draw the attention over there, and the fact of, in closing, this last remark, the idea of you being invited and going to a meeting with the school board like on a Monday or whatever is going on, the fact is, how can you go to the school board meetings when you have to be, your first responsibility be at Assembly meetings? So we need to stop the tracks and not have any more of this and do it now, not later. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Would anyone else like to speak for us? All right, seeing no one, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Adjourn.